Brian Flynn. I am the founder and owner of Super7.
You certainly perfected your gun.
And I think that that's a very different perspective than most people have on their business. You know, they always want it to keep growing, keep getting bigger. And I'm like, I almost feel like in some ways we're getting bigger, you know, with me fighting against growing. Because I don't want to get to a point where you just have to make shit to pay the bills.
Right.
Because, you know, we can all go be miserable working for anybody else. So I don't want to be miserable working here, working for myself. But there's a certain point where you're like, okay, there's a lot of, I'm responsible. When I was about to say, there's a lot of mouths to feed, but it's not just that. It's like when I hire somebody, I'm saying to that person, I'm going to take care of you and your family. I'm going to help you. I'm going to pay your mortgage. I'm going to pay your food. Like, it's not something I take on lightly. So if I'm going to hire this person, I'm intending for them to work here for a long time, and I've got to be responsible for their life. So I've got to make sure that I can be responsible for taking on that life. And I think so many people look at hiring in a very different way, where they're like, ah, if this guy doesn't work out, we'll fire him, we'll get somebody else. You know, it's like, people aren't disposable, and people's lives aren't disposable. And it's a really tricky thing as you start to expand into a bigger company role. And there's no guideposts that I can find for people that have done it. So, I don't know, I'm on a fucking real weird tangent now that has nothing to do with this.
It actually makes perfect sense, because it goes back to the initial, like, the conversation about punk rock and community and taking care of each other, because I feel the same way. Like, you know, like, I've told Joel and I've told everyone that works for me, you know, I want you to be happy. Like, I want to pay you. Financially, I want you to be rewarded, because you have to take care of yourself and we all need money. But I also want you to come to work and be stoked that you're at work and to do things that are fun. And that actually kind of leads me into another thing that I wanted to ask you. Like, so I know that, you know, when Joel came on, he brought, before Joel, in the very beginning, it's just like, I'm sure it was for you, it's just you, really. And it's your vision. And then as you bring people in, they add to the pot. And like, so I've been very open. Like, Joel's brought things into the company that weren't things that I would necessarily be stoked on all by myself, but then I see his excitement for them, and it makes sense, and we bring them in. And the same thing with other members of our staff. And I remember reading that, you know, that was something that you had done too in an interview somewhere. And I just wondered, you know, like, what is that like for you, like, having, you know, like, the people you trust, and you know, you choose them, you trust them, you bring them in to work with you, and then, you know, tapping into their fandoms and their exciting things, and like letting go a little bit of that reign of control and letting them kind of like steer the ship a little that way.
Yeah, there's a couple answers sort of baked in there. The first thing, obviously, is that if it's just me, I'm banging the microphone, so if it's just me, there's only so much we can do, because my world experience is limited to a certain window. So there's only so much that we can do if it has to be my point of view. Within that, one of the things that helped break us out in the beginning was, and it's a bad analogy I use all the time, is there's more than one way to get to the airport. The goal is to get to the airport. So some days I might drive the fastest way. My parents are in the car, I might drive the more scenic way. I want to stop at In-N-Out before I go, I might go the long way so I can get a burger before I go. None of those routes to the airport are right or wrong. They all still get me to the airport. So if somebody that works for me takes the scenic route when I normally take the fast route, I have to be able to step back and go, that's okay. It still gets me to the airport. So try not to micromanage what they're doing. They're adults. Let them, they can fucking get to the airport. Let them get to the airport, you know. so I've really gone deep on this bad analogy, but that's part of it. Is like at a certain point, you can't do everything, and if you can't allow people to have their own agency and point of view within the parameters that you've set, then you're going to hit a wall of what you're able to do. So the first part is, as an individual, being able to step back and go, okay, here's how I would do it, but I'm going to let those parameters get a little wider and be okay with slightly different interpretations of what I think it is, as long as it still feels correct, as long as it has the right, emotional timbre or whatever to it. And then secondarily, as we move along, it's that same thing. Like, my window of specifics that I'm interested in is going to get further and further irrelevant as I get older. It's no different than talking to some 80-year-old dude and he tells you how much Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers changed his life. And you're like, it doesn't mean anything to me. So I ask the people that work for me, like, what means something to you? What is, if you could have one thing that you would work on, what would it be? Okay, well, if that seems to make sense for us, or we have an opportunity there, well, let's try to figure out how to pull that together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if I keep limiting it to just me, and I don't trust the people that work for me, that they also can have good ideas, and then that part of it is then me training them. This is how you take your idea, refine it, and actually get it through to output, to something that's finished. Because, it's like, I'm sure you deal with it all the time. Everybody thinks that any drawing they have will make a great t-shirt, and you're just like, that is not how it works at all. Oh, no. Like, good t-shirts that actually sell are hard to do. Like, shitty t-shirts are easy to do, but good t-shirts are hard to do, and you have to have a certain aesthetic. And once people get it, they get it. But it's that same thing of like, my job more than anything is helping teach the people that work for me how to become more successful in what they are working on. And by proxy, when they start having success here in the things that they want to do, that gives them a chance to lead and have agency on their life and be more successful. We are going to be more successful because of it. Because now it's not just me driving the train. It's like I'm driving, and then I've got like 19 co-pilots, and I can trust them to drive their own. I really started to ruin that analogy, but that's all right. But it's no different than like some of the videos and stuff we do. Like, I do a lot of them because we started it by me being on video because people would want to hear directly from me. That's why I started talking. But a lot of other people at the company don't want to be on videos, but a lot of people do. Yeah. They think it'd be fun. So I'm like, okay, Nomi, you can do some videos. Josh can do videos. Kyle can do videos. It's not about my ego. You want to do it? Talk about what you're doing here. It's great. So many other places would be like, oh no, it's a pecking order. It's a this, it's a that. It's like, I don't care about any of that. You want to be involved? You want to talk about it and be excited about what you're doing? Jump in front of the camera. I'm okay with that. I mean, the store guys, Daniel and Brent, do videos all the time. And then, we always get feedback on those videos. There's always some dude to be like, oh, that's a little queer. And it's like, yeah, it is. It's actually very queer. And it's great. So shut up.
No, I think from an outsider looking in, getting a view to the people that work with you is amazing. Like, that's exciting. Like,
every other place, they want to keep people boxed away. Right. Like, why? Like, let them have as much sun as they want.
It makes perfect sense too, because you're completely right, and I'm feeling it as I get older. The things I like are becoming more irrelevant. So letting the younger people that work for me, that I chose for a reason, and that you chose for a reason, letting their voice be heard is the way to stay relevant as a company and to continue to grow and to do cool things. And because eventually what you do, guys you and I's age like, is going to fade away to something nobody but guys our age are going to care about.
Well, it's the same thing. It's like, I want you to be excited. I want the emotional participation is what is so interesting to me. So when I get that 3 3/4 Shogun Godzilla, I'm over the moon. There's a guy that works here in the office that doesn't understand why I care about this size because he didn't grow up with it. But conversely, there's things he grew up with that I'm a little bit like, yeah, it's cool, but I don't understand the emotion. But if he can reinterpret that so that the other person on the other end has that same emotional reaction, that's what's important to me. Like, I'm in many ways, I'm not selling plastic to anyone. I'm selling emotion. I am selling nostalgia in some cases, but more than anything, I'm selling a feeling. I'm selling excitement. I tell people a lot of times that what we make here isn't necessarily toys, they're gifts. A lot of times they're gifts to yourself, sometimes they're gifts to other people, but it's this thing where you're like, oh, I'm getting this because this makes me feel. And that's what we're driving home. That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make people feel. And that's what's awesome about it, is it's an emotional connection. No different, going back to the punk rock thing, we can pull out any number of records where you would just be like, what you get from that record is worth more money than it ever cost to press all the vinyl that it was ever made. Being in North Carolina, I will assume that Avail is a really big deal.
Yep, Avail's conformity as well.
Well, yes, Errol Brecht did the skull.
Yep.
You know, it's
actually,
like
a good chunk of the sleeve is Errol. Yeah.
The amount of times I redrew that COC skull as a kid is mind-numbing. I mean, I probably redrew it 200 times, and
it's such an unbelievably iconic image.
And you know, and same thing, and like he just kind of did it. But it's like, still to this day, like, I know who he is because of that. Right. I've never met him, I've never gone to see him, but you know, like, Avail didn't mean as much to me as it did to you, but I know that other people, like, I can see an Avail show, I can see the people like literally with tears in their eyes when Avail got back together and played shows. And it's like, that's what we're all striving for across the board.